The telling of stories in the Middle East is a great tradition. And often at the heart of these stories are two very important words or ideas: honor and generosity. There's a story like this in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14. It was told by Jesus, and it's a story about invitations to a dinner.
It was a Saturday, and one of the Pharisees had invited Jesus to lunch. During the meal, Jesus told the men a story. The story was about hospitality, but it was also a parable about the kingdom of God. A certain man, said Jesus, gave a dinner and invited many people. The custom was to draw up a list of guests, usually important men in the community, and send out invitations several days before the meal. In this way they could say whether or not they could come, or what circumstances prevented them. Preparations got started several days before the dinner. The honor and reputation of the host depended on the excellence of his hospitality. The quality of the food must be outstanding, the presentation perfect. When everything was ready on the day of the dinner, a servant was sent out to remind the guests it was time to come. It was the custom to hang a special cloth in front of the house. While the cloth was visible, the invited guests knew they were welcome. But after the third course of the meal, it would be removed, and then it was too late, the door would be closed. When the servant came to the first guest, the man had changed his mind. "I have bought a piece of land, and I must go and see it. I ask you to have me excused." Strange. Surely the man would have looked at the land before he bought it. The next guest also made excuses. "I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to test them. I ask you to have me excused." This could not be true. Nobody would buy cattle without first inspecting them. When the next guest was requested to come, he did not even apologize. He just made a statement. "I have married a wife, therefore I cannot come." Did he not know he would be married by this day? Gradually, the situation became clear. Not a single guest would come to the dinner. It was not a coincidence. It was a deliberate insult to the generosity of the master. The whole community had rejected him. When the servant returned and explained what had happened, the master was very upset. The behavior of his guests was dishonorable, but now he must do something to show the true meaning of hospitality. "Go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in here the poor and the disabled and the lame and the blind." These men were not puffed up with pride, and the master knew that these guests were glad to be invited. They were happy to say thank you and to be treated as men of honor and of importance. But still, the master was not satisfied. "Go out again," he said. "Go out into the countryside. Go along the roads and down the footpaths and persuade people to come in." Some people might not believe the good news immediately, and when they did, they knew what it would mean. By accepting his invitation, they would associate themselves with the name of the man who provided the dinner. From now on, they were on his side, and they were expected to be loyal. The master did not ask them to bring gifts, but they could not change the date. They must come as they were, right away. So the dinner was not cancelled. And the men who came and ate the food were people who appreciated it and were glad to have it. But for the men who were invited first, there was no second chance. Jesus invited people into the kingdom of God, but the Pharisees just criticized him. Mostly it was people who knew they were sinners and needed a new start in life who became his disciples.
Jesus called all kinds of people to follow him, rich and poor, young and old, the uneducated and intellectuals, women and men, people in power and people who were oppressed. But some of the rich were so involved in their own business and pleasures, they failed to respond to Jesus, and so, very foolishly, they excluded themselves from the kingdom of God, while some of the strictly religious preferred to criticize him for accepting and welcoming those they called sinners. It didn't have to be like that. God is generous. The invitation to be in his kingdom is for everyone. The meal is served. But God will not force us. We can say yes, or we can refuse the invitation and miss the party. Today is the day of invitation. Tomorrow? Who can say?